my channel where together we sew. If you're brand new here, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. And if you're returning, I'm glad to see you back again. I love seeing your comments down below. That keeps me making these videos. So thanks so much. So today is my UFO WIP video update. I've got quite a few things going on, as you can see on the wall behind me. I've got a variety of things going on. So up here is the designer mystery block of the month from Fat Quarter Shop. Those are the next 2 months, month 7 and 8. So I just finished those. I got caught up a little bit. December was kind of crazy for me, so I didn't do a whole lot of like block of the month sewing, so I'm a little bit behind. The ones right next to it, right there, are the Socialites blocks. I'm still a couple behind on those. That's the Socialites 2 also from Fat Quarter Shop. I will link that down below because that's an ongoing free sew along. So if you wanted to make these blocks for yourself, you can. They are available in a 3, 6, or 9-inch size. I'm doing the 9-inch size, and supposedly this quilt in the 9-inch size is going to end up being 99 inches square. So it's going to be quite a large size quilt, and I'm kind of excited about that because I make a lot of smaller quilts, so I'm excited to make something bigger. And then the stars that are like this way above my head, those are from my All-Star Block of the Week sew along. So the Ohio Star was week 1, which are at the very top. The next level down are the Friendship Stars, which we just did yesterday, and that was so much fun. Y'all got to see me show you how to use a seam ripper. Because I wasn't paying attention. I was talking more than I was working, and so I had twisted a couple of the blocks. So I just gave you a lesson on how to use a seam ripper. And then the one below that, or that's that way, is a paper piecing project I'm working on, and that's called an Art Deco star, and that's something that you wouldn't be able to do traditionally. So yeah, so that was a paper piecing project. Now, I have had several of you ask me to give you a little tutorial on paper piecing, and I think today that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a quick tutorial. This little piece that I've been working on is called the Swedish Log Cabin, and this piece is an extra piece that I use, a sashing piece, that I'm going to put together all 4 of them when they're all done to make this block. These are the top 2 pieces. I need to put this one together with it after I finish the one I'm going to show you. So we're going to do that today, and then I'll give you a peek at a couple of finishes or near finishes, things that I was working on my channel that I've shown you guys before after I'm done with the tutorial. So let's take a quick peek on how to do some FPP. So if you are brand new to FPP or foundation paper piecing, this is what a typical pattern looks like. It'll have the numbers on it showing the different sections. So that's section 1, 2, 3, and that's how you sew them. You sew them in order of the numbers. Now, they had suggested fabrics for this block, this where I got this pattern from. And so they put the colors in each one, but I chose my own colors. So that's why you'll see where I have white or black, white, gray, black, because I had these fabrics that I received in a subscription box that I wanted to use for something, and I decided that this would be a good project for that. So all I did was write, so as I go, I know which piece goes where. And now I made 3 other pieces already. So this is one of them minus this piece. That's a sashing piece. So this is what the block is actually going to look like. So I did the same thing on all 4 pieces of paper that I did on here as I wrote the color names, so I would make sure that they would all end up the same. So how you begin paper piecing is you cut your paper out on the outside of the seam allowance line. So this outside thick black line is the seam allowance line. You want to make sure that your fabrics go beyond that, so when you trim this all up, it comes out nice, and then you've got from this outside dark line to this line is the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when you put all 4 blocks together, they will match up perfectly. So the first thing you have to do, I'm going to move these fabrics out of the way a little bit with a paper piecing project, is make sure your first couple of fabrics are lined up correctly, and once those are lined up correctly, you'll be perfectly fine. So For FPP, you are going to sew directly on the lines. So you're going to always have this side of the pattern with the lines on it facing you. So that's the top, and then this is the bottom. As you can see, it's blank. So the interesting thing about FPP is that when you cut the fabrics, there is some waste. So if you're a person who doesn't like fabric waste, you're probably not going to like FPP. And it bothered me at first because there is a lot of waste compared to traditional piecing, because you have to cut each piece bigger. So here is the first section, which is my black fabric. And as you can see, it's quite a bit larger because it has to cover that space completely. And then I have a little bit, I still have the selvage, I left the selvage on, but it's got to come off the edge of the paper over here too. That seam allowance that I was talking about. So the very first piece, and the best way to start FPP, which I didn't do for this block, is to start with a solid fabric or batiks, because you can use either side. But if you're using a print or something like this, where like this is sparkly on one side and not on the other, it's plain on the other side, just like a print, the first thing you're do is the very first piece that you put on has to go pretty side away from you. So if you remember that, that's like the biggest thing to remember if you're a beginner FPP. Pretty side has to go out away from you. And then each piece after that you add, the pretty side is going to go towards you. So now this piece, I'm going to layer back here behind my black piece, and it's going to go towards me. And the reason for that, I will show you coming up. But what's going to happen is, this is piece number 2, and there's a line right here. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to lay this behind, not in front like I am now, but just to show you. I'm going to lay this behind towards me, and after we sew this, you're going to pull the paper back, trim it, and then that piece is going to get flipped, and I'll show you this as we go, and then it will be going the correct direction, so it'll get flipped like that eventually after it's sewn. So the only thing you need to do, and it's good if you have a light you can hold it up to, so I can hold it up to my lights here, and I can see through the paper and make sure, and I don't think I have any way to show you guys this, sorry about that, but I can see through the paper if I hold it up to the light to make sure that I have that piece in the correct spot. Now if you're a very beginner, you may want to pin it in place, but beware, if you pin an FPP block, you can get bumps and your block might not lay completely flat after you rip out the paper. So I'm going to hold it up to my light here, and I can see that I'm covering this whole part right here. I need to cover from here all the way down off the paper a little bit. And now I'm going to add my next piece, which pretty side towards me, so like this, and I'm going to hold it up to the light and make sure that I have at least a 1/4 inch of this piece overlapping the line right here I'm going to sew. You don't want the whole thing covered, this whole piece covered. You want just about a 1/4 inch, because we're going to sew here, peel back this paper and trim off the excess, and then it's going to flip up and cover that whole section. Okay? Hopefully that makes somewhat sense to you guys. It's a little bit difficult to show FPP on film. I feel like that's something that is easier taught in person, but I thought I'd just give you guys a little overview of what FPP is, because a lot of people have actually been asking me. So okay, turn my sewing machine on, take this over to my machine. I'm going to look in the light again, make sure it didn't move since I set it down. Okay, good to go. And I'm going to put my needle right on the line that I showed you guys that I was going to sew on. And in FPP, you want to take a back stitch at the start and end before you cut your thread. So, hopefully, yeah. So I sewed, hopefully you guys can see this at least a little bit. I sewed right on that line between section 1 and section 2, and this is what it looks like on the back side. So it looks wrong right now because this fabric, the pretty side, is down. But what we're going to do is we're going to fold this paper back right to where that seam is, and it's going to want to fold right where you just sewed. So I folded it back, and then you're going to trim a 1/4 inch away from that fold to get your excess off. Okay. Unfold the paper again, flip this over, and then I'm going to finger press this, where we're actually going to press this too. And now you can see that your fabric is going the correct direction, and it's definitely covering this little piece right here, because that's the goal, is to cover the next piece completely with that fabric. So hopefully that explains a little bit as to why you want your pieces a little bit larger than the section you're working on. Because when you flip it up, you want to make sure it completely covers. And I don't have a light to show you, but if I shined a light underneath this, you would be able to see that it's completely covering this little section right here. So that was number 1. That is number 2. This little section here now is number 3. So I'm going to put my next piece underneath, making sure I have a 1/4 inch at least hanging over this line, because this is the next line we're going to sew on, and do the same process that I just did. So here's my next piece. It's going to go on just like that, and I'm going to look into the light with it and make sure I've got at least a 1/4 inch. Okay, and I do. So I'm going to take this to my machine, put my needle down in the paper. Now, if you make a mistake, you definitely can rip it out. Just be super careful that you need to pick kind of slowly to make sure you don't rip your paper where you have to start all over from the beginning. If you pick slowly, you can reuse the same paper. Okay, so here's what the back looks like again. So this is before I've flipped the pretty side. There's the line I sewed, and here's the line on the front that I sewed. So I'm going to do the same thing that I just did. Flip this, trim the excess away. Okay, open my paper back up, and then I'm going to go over here and finger press this. And you can double check, but I can definitely tell that it's covering this little section here by plenty of fabric. It's always better to have a little bit too much extra fabric than not enough, because you don't want to go through all this work and put this together only to find that when you flip your block over, there's like a hole like that or something where there's no fabric covering. So it's better to have more fabric than less in FPP. So that was section 3. So now I'm going to move on to section 4, which is on the opposite side of this little first piece that we did. Okay, so again, I'm going to add it with the pretty side down, and I'm going to look in this light here because I can see it shining through the paper to make sure I've got the section covered that I'm going to flip this out towards. Starting on the next line. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. So this is what it looks like on the back. After I trim it, it's going to get flipped so the pretty side goes up. And this is the line that I stitched on. So I'm going to pull this paper back. Trim this guy 1/4 inch. And now that I can see that this is going to definitely cover to the end of this pattern, I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece off too. So get rid of all that. So now I've got a nice clean edge. Flip the paper back out, and then I'm going to finger press this. So as you can see, we're starting to build this block. So now I've got this piece, and this piece all attached. And I'm going to keep going and finish the next white and then do the gray and the black. And another thing that I wanted to share with you guys really quick is I've finished sewing all my pieces on, and as you can see, my block looks like a hot mess right now, right? Because all of these pieces are hanging off the edges of the block. So I thought you guys might want to see this part after I put all these pieces onto my block. But as you can see, it is starting to look more like this one. So there we go. So what I'm going to do now is flip my block over. And remember how I told you guys to cut outside that seam allowance line? So now what we're going to do to make this look like a block and not some sort of monstrosity is I'm going to put my 1/4 inch marking on my ruler on the inside dark line and make sure that the outside of my ruler is on the dark line that's on the outside of the block. And I'm going to trim right on that line. So that's gone. And as you can see here, there's still a dark line right here. So from that dark line to the outside edge that we just cut, that's our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when we attach all these blocks together, you're going to have the perfect 1/4 inch. So I'm going to trim this all the way around. Okay. And usually after you do FPP, you probably will have to change your needle on your machine because it does dull a little bit from, you know, going through paper. And also if you're doing a big project, probably your rotary blade too. Okay, so now you can see that it's square. You can still see that 1/4 inch seam allowance line all the way around. And it looks like a block instead of a monstrosity. So now you kind of get an idea of why you need the extra fabric to hang over the edges. So that way when you cut this, it comes out perfect. And that's the beauty of FPP, is that it comes out perfect. So now what I will end up doing is I already put a sashing piece onto this other square. I will end up joining these together. And I will grab my other piece over here that I've already finished. I will end up, I put some sashing strips on this piece and a little center cornerstone, and I will end up with those together like that. So it's going to make this kind of different, cute little block that I am not sure what I'm going to do with yet. So I hope you found that somewhat helpful in explaining what FPP is, or foundation paper piecing. I know a lot of you have asked me for a tutorial. I'm not the best teacher of FPP. I certainly can do the technique, but there's lots of other people out there that can teach you if you're looking for a teacher. I just like to do it every once in a while, but I like to do it on blocks that I couldn't traditionally piece very easily. So that's what I like to reserve it for. So next week I will bring that block finished and show it to you all done with all the pieces put together and tell you what I'm going to do with it, because I used some Michael Miller Fairy Frost fabric for that I received in a subscription box. And it is not the softest fabric because it's the one with the high amount of glitter on it. So it's definitely not going to be for a quilt. So I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do with it. I'm thinking either of making a pillow out of it. That would be just a decorative pretty pillow, not something to lay on, or maybe a tote bag or something. So come back next week and I'll show you the block finished, and maybe I will have made a decision of what I'm doing with it by then. Okay, so the last few things I wanted to show you was my red work quilt. This is the one that you all voted on for me to work on, and I finished it completely. I know I showed it to you guys before done, but it's quilted and bound. So this is what this guy looks like now. And I really love it. I'm really glad that I did this quilt. So that one's all finished. And then I also finished, now this one's not bound, but all the blocks are done and it's quilted. So all I have to do this week is bind it. So hopefully next week I will have this one and another quilt bound to show you, and also have that FPP block done. So here is my penguin quilt. He's all done and quilted. And I really love him. All of my kids are fighting over this, and somebody said, well, why don't you just make one for each of your kids? I have 4 children. I'm not doing this 3 more times. It came out really good. It's really, really cute. As you can see, hopefully here, I quilted it with snowflakes. But they were a lot of work. The penguins were a lot of work, and I'm not going to do those ever again. So usually this type of pattern I do one time and that's it. And there's the backing. So really cute, perfect backing. I think that I was trying to decide what color I was going to bind it in, and my daughter was telling me that I should do it in this blue, but the blue on the back and the front are just slightly off, so I don't think that would look good. So I think I'm going to do it in black to frame it out. So I think that'll give this quilt a nice little frame, but I just love it. So there's my penguin quilt and a finish for the week, except for binding. So that's all I've got for this week. I need to catch up on a couple of socialites blocks yet. I need to catch up on the last Corey Yoder block of the week, the Buttercup and Slate. I actually only have one more block of that to do. And then the finishing for her quilts. Her quilts are very interesting. I love her quilts, so this is not a criticism. But when she does like a sew along, her finishings are almost a whole nother quilt, because we have to make, I can't even remember how many pieces it was that we have to cut to finish it, but there's little blocks, little star blocks that are the sashing, and so we have to cut a whole bunch of pieces to make those little stars and then sash it together. And there was lots of stars. I don't remember how many pieces it was, but I know it was quite a few. And so I was like, oh, okay. So it's almost like making a whole nother quilt. So I know I will not finish that by this next week, but hopefully I'll finish that last block and get some of the fabric for those stars out and cut, and maybe even get 1 or 2 of the stars done, hopefully. So lots of stuff going on, lots of block of the weeks. Don't forget to come on over to my channel, or actually Stephen's channel, of Stephen Bland of Bland Designs and the Idiot Quilter, on Wednesday for our next live for the sew along we're working on. We have some new information to share with you guys, because we've gone through the pattern, and the pattern is, even though it's supposed to be a beginner quilt, it's not exactly beginner friendly. So we're going to try to break it down a little bit better for you guys so it's easier to understand, because even us, we had a hard time, both Stephen and I, understanding the pattern. So I hope you come on over for that, and then we'll continue on that. And then next Saturday, the next block of the week for my All-Stars. So hopefully I'll see you soon, and I hope you have a great week and get lots of sewing done. Take care. Bye.